Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my November wrap-up, which is both a really good reading month in terms of quality while also being one of my smaller reading months in terms of quantity. The past couple months I've been reading like long books while also being fairly cut back on my time that I have to read, I would say. So I think that the last 2 months running have been I've finished about 4 books, and that's how many books I finished in November is 4. But I will say the one book that's not going to be included in this wrap up that I did spend a large portion of November reading still is Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. I think I started that around the 2/3 mark of the month, like the 20th-ish. And I just am still reading it in early December, so I don't include books in my wrap up if I don't finish them in that month. So I'll just mention that, and then that'll be in my December wrap up. But I did spend a lot of time in November reading that. But the 4 books that I did finish this month were all really good for me, with the exception of one that was just kind of average good. The other 3 were some favorites for me. So I read 2,004 pages in this month between these books, and my average rating was a 4.63. So that tells you how good it was right there. 3 of the 4 books were straight up a full 5-star, and the 4th book was a 3.5. So we will start with that one because I tend to do my wrap-ups in that order, where I go from either in the order that I read them, or I'll go from lowest to highest so that we get more positive as the video goes on. So with that said, the first book to talk about, the book that I gave 3.5 stars to, is A Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross. And so this is the second book in the Elements of Cadence duology, which began with A River Enchanted, which I read I guess in October the previous month, and then I pretty much went right onto this one, which is not something that I usually do in terms of binging series really close back to back. I will sometimes read 1 book a month or 1 book every 2 months, but I always have more books and more time in between, so it definitely is an interesting experience to go and actually binge a series. It's, of course, a duology is pretty easy to do that with because after you finish the first one, you only have 1 more book to binge. But I liked this, but I didn't personally find it to be quite as strong and as engaging as the first one, which is kind of reflected in my rating. This duology as a whole, it deals with the island of Cadence and our main character Jack, who was living a life on the mainland. He had left the island as a younger kind of preteen, and he has been living on the mainland for quite a while, but his clan is having a problem with young girls going missing, and they think that his skill as someone who is trained in music and who is a bard, they think that they can use the magic of that music to help them solve this mystery and to get the daughters of their clan back. And it all kind of unravels from there because this island is split into 2 enemy sides with 2 clans, but the magic of everything and the folk, the Fae, they're all wrapped up in the magic of it, where the island is not really meant to be split. There is something wrong with the way the magic is operating and people taking advantage of it. So there's a human side to this plot, but there is also a whimsical, magical side to this plot. And it all kind of, in my opinion, balances well throughout, but a little bit better of a balance in the first book than the second. The second book has a trope that I'm not the biggest fan of, where certain characters are separated from each other, and that's never something that I love the most to read. It is something that Rebecca Ross seems to like writing because both of her duologies that I've read so far have included it, but I personally enjoyed that trope more in the Letters of Enchantment duology than I did in this one. It could just be because of the settings that the characters found themselves in and the situations that separated them, but that's not to say that I didn't like this. I still thought that it was easy to read and was pretty magical, and she is a good writer. I wouldn't say that Rebecca Ross's writing blows me away, but it is good, it's solid, and so the 3.5 stars is just kind of me saying that I liked it, but it wasn't necessarily anything to write home about. and I maybe would have expected a little bit more personal enjoyment based on how much I liked the first one. I would have hoped that the second one I liked even more, so that didn't happen, but this is still a good duology, and it's something where I can see why it really appeals to people. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the other 3 books that I finished in November, I gave them all 5 stars, so I will just go in the order that I finished them. So the first one of the month was House of Chains by Steven Erikson, which is the 4th book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and this is one that stretched from October into November, which is why it's the first book that I finished in November, because I already had a significant portion of it complete. But this is super hard to talk about without spoilers because of the implications of it all. Everything is connected to everything else. And this is, in a way, a sequel to Deadhouse Gates. We do get sort of a split between the main locations and characters that we're following throughout the books. And this has a very interesting digression in the sense that at the beginning of House of Chains, we follow a character that we've never met before, and at first the timing and the timeline is unclear until we kind of figure out how this character connects to everything that we know so far. So that was a little bit of a surprise, and it took me, I think, a little bit to figure out whether I was enjoying it or not. Turns out I was, but I was confused at first. But that was pretty fun, and like everything that it goes on to do in this book and the way that that character that we start with connects to the overall location and plot that we were then going to follow in House of Chains. It is very, it's very rich in lore, and you get to explore even more of the world. And even now, being like a month removed from this book, I can remember what happened in it, but if I were to try and talk about details, I just feel like I don't remember. I'm just operating on vibes, which is the fact that I'm really enjoying my time with this series so far, and I'm not stressing myself out trying to remember everything, because a lot of the times, Steven Erikson will help you to figure stuff out when he wants you to, and if he doesn't want you to, then I don't think there's any sense in trying to, obviously it's fun if you want to try and figure it all out, but I think that just being along for the ride and enjoying the books, as they're written, and then, going along and then figuring out the reveals when they're happening can be just as rewarding, which is kind of what I'm doing, and I'm loving it. So that's House of Chains. The next 5-star that I finished in the month of November was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. And so I don't remember exactly what I gave the first Emily Wilde book. I know it wasn't 5 stars, but it was something like 4.25 or 4.5, aka I really enjoyed it, but I didn't feel that next level of love for it that would make it a 5-star, and I was a little disappointed at the time because even though I enjoyed it so much, I was hoping for that feeling, and so I was really happy when I started this one, and I kind of immediately knew that whatever it was that this had, it was what I was hoping for the first one to have for me. And it could just be that after reading the first book already, I was already invested right from the get-go of this one. Which is very possible, and I didn't have that investment when I started the first one just because I was new to it. But regardless, I was 100% in right from the first page of this adventure, and I don't want to say too much in order to spoil the events of the first book, but it's a similar book in concept and an organization, in the sense that it is an adventure. It is told through Emily Wilde's journals, but we are, of course, in a different location. We have a few more characters added to the cast in this one too, which was fun. And we had just a different kind of setting in terms of the townspeople and the small everyday problems that they run into, and the types of fae that they run into. There are different I don't know, breeds. I don't know what the right word for fae is. Maybe different species is the right word. But it's similar. Like, in large part, it is similar to the first book, but I saw good progression, and like I really liked the way that the plot is developing from the first book to this book. And so I'm really, really excited for the third one. And I don't even know how many books this series is supposed to be. It could be a trilogy, and that could be the last one. I don't know. But based on the direction that this was going, I think that I'm gonna love the third one just as much, and I really hope that I do. So this was like the perfect palate cleanser read for me this month, in the sense that it was really easy to read, and I just loved it so much, and it was very like cozy. And this one is sort of set in a setting that feels wintry, so it was perfect. I guess the first one was as well. They very much feel like winter books, so they're perfect for this time of year, and I just had so much fun. Last but not least, we have a book that was also 5 stars, surprise, and that is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. And so with this, I think that it's safe to say that Catherine Arden has entered my favorite authors conversation, because having read the Winter Night trilogy and now having read this and just loving all 4 of the books that I've read from her very, very much, she hasn't missed for me yet. So I'm really like looking forward to seeing what she'll do next. And this is a book that has, I think, a very specific appeal, and I'm part of that appeal. So The Warm Hands of Ghosts deals with we kind of have 2 main characters, but in the first place, our main character is a World War I combat nurse named Laura Ivan, and she has been, like, I guess, honorably discharged, like with an injury, and sent back to Canada. She was fighting. She was on the front lines, healing, not fighting, but she was like on the front lines or near them in Europe, and she is back in Canada now, and it is late 1917, and she is in Halifax, and she is essentially home for the like Halifax harbor disaster, where the ship full of explosives blew up and devastated Halifax. But she loses the remainder of her family in this disaster, and so she is kind of an unmoored soul, like helping in the hospitals, doing her work, but not really sure like where her life is leading her. And she gets word that her brother, who was fighting in the war, she gets his things back, which is something that they normally send when someone dies, but something isn't right about it. She doesn't feel like she's getting the answers that she wants when she like inquires about her brother. And so she decides to kind of go back and to look for him and to look for answers about her brother. And I think that knowing that is kind of all that you should know going in, because this book is very like interesting in the way that it unfolds what's really going on, and it is kind of dark, surrealist, like historical fantasy horror, which is a combination that ended up really working for me. But I think that you should go through the book like not really understanding what's going on, because the characters don't, until it becomes a little bit more clear later on, because it helps you have that feeling of like foreboding and the tension, and the fact that this is like really dark, like it deals with a lot of really dark parts of World War I and like what has happened to people who experienced it. So it was very interesting in that sense, and very like emotionally dark. But it is still like fairly short. It's like less than 330 pages. And it was easy for me to read, not content wise, but by the fact that I think that Catherine Arden's writing is just really good, really like easy for me to sink into and to like propel me through it. So, and this also made me like emotional at the end. There were a lot of character dynamics that I really enjoyed, and there were things that were undercurrents for most of the book that came to a head. And I really enjoyed the resolution. I was not sure how this was going to end for most of it. And I was kind of surprised by how much I enjoyed this, because even though I loved Winter Night, when an author tries something new like this, like a different historical period, like something that's equally a historical fiction wartime novel as it is like a fantasy, that it's a little bit more of a risk. Like, you're not sure how they're going to execute it, but I thought she did phenomenally. So I really loved this. And that was my November in reading, which was honestly a really great month, especially because, like I mentioned before, a chunk of it was spent reading Rhythm of War in preparation for Wind and Truth, which is a release that I'm very excited about. So it also had that going for it. And yeah, those are the 4 books that I read this month, the 4 books that I finished. So please let me know down in the comments what you think about any of these books, if you've read them, or let me know what you think about what I said. Please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you would like to see more content from me in the future, and as always, I have my Discord with Ben and socials linked in the description if you're interested in any of that stuff, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!